A year ago, while developing a choreography that uses human energy or body heat to alter the temperature of an exhibition space, I remembered a formula that I had learned growing up in Los Angeles that used cricket chirps to find the outside temperature. So you set a timer and you count how many chirps in 14 seconds, then add 40, and that's the degrees in Fahrenheit. My first inclination was to bring in thousands of these chirping natural thermometers into the gallery and have them double as both the soundscape and the temperature sensors. However, within minutes of researching where to buy crickets in bulk, it became really clear that this wasn't going to work at all, both practically and ethically, on many levels. And I came across an article announcing that crickets in Hawaii had gone silent. Today in Kauai, 99% of the cricket population are silent or flat-winged, and the remaining chirping crickets are on the verge of extinction. This all happened very rapidly as a result of an acoustically oriented parasitic fly that has been wiping out the chirping cricket population since 2003. The crickets that survived this parasitic air raid had a rare mutation where they lacked the ridges on their wings, the file and scraper structures that rub together to actually make the chirping noise. This made them phenotypically resemble female crickets, but more importantly, their silence functioned as an invisibility cloak. The flies would pass right over them. This news of the disappearing nightscape and muting of a sound that for me once functioned as a type of sonic horizon line resonated with me and my work. The irony that these natural thermometers are going silent at a time where global temperatures are rising due to the current climate crisis, as well as the fact that this silencing entailed a new species of crickets who continue to rigorously perform their ritual mating movements, expending huge amounts of energy despite not making any sound at all. Was very exciting to me as a choreographer. How do I get rid of the bar? I'm interested in the satellite strategy or whatever it's called, and for me increased movement is kind of meaningless unless I see what that looks like as like in terms of where it's happening in the body and the relationship to the chirping cricket and the female, and even like what the move is from the male who is the flatwing who's kind of hovering around waiting for the female. So for me it's like all of those parts are the substance that I would be interested in that I can't find.
And you wouldn't, because it's mostly like stuff that happens
in a lab.
You know, well, no, it's like in nature, it's like stuff that happens in the grass in the dark.
Right,
you know,
right.
Without us really seeing it, and so, and in the lab, all it is an insect walking, which is not really
right.
all that informative. So
it might be informative though. My choreographer brain immediately assumed this meant I'd be able to witness the evolution of a mating dance and fast forward within years instead of 10,000 years, and that the flatwings were already developing a new physical technique to replace their call to ensure their species' survival. And this led me to Marlene Zook, the evolutionary biologist leading the research lab, to ask for footage of their recent mating behaviors, which I found out doesn't exist. I'm definitely more focused on the evolution of behavior and how that translates to physical movement. And so that's why I was trying to figure out if this very crucial period where they're going from the satellite behavior to either going extinct or figuring out another method of calling could potentially lead to something more physical. You know, running in circles so that the male would have more chances of bumping into a female, you know, just like...
Well, see, that's what you would do. They don't have that much of a repertoire.
Right. So they don't really learn from their behavioral mistakes. It's more of an evolutionary path.
Right.
So if one of them is, you know, rubbing against a leaf and it makes a sound that draws a cricket, or that mimics the sound of a cricket and it draws a female, they're not going to be like, oh, that worked.
Right, exactly.
Okay, that clarifies a lot for me.
So insects certainly can learn, and I think increasingly people are realizing that their behavior is somewhat more flexible than we used to think, but their cognitive processes are just not the same as people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
it's important, to appreciate how different other organisms are from us. If you were that size and were down there, you would try and see, you would try and do all this. They are not like people.
Marlene repeatedly reminded me of my tendencies towards anthropomorphism and reinforced that crickets are essentially automatons, hardwired to perform these movements whether or not they know if they're making any sound at all.
Right. As a choreographer and someone who's videotaping every single one of my rehearsals and every gesture and movement all the time, I'm also interested in what it would look like for a flatwing cricket to be stridulating, imitating or still pretending to be creating the sound but not creating the sound, would also have a different movement quality than one that is making a sound. So all of those levels of detail are the part that for me is just completely fascinating.
It just looks like their wings are raised, and you can see the wings tremble very slightly. That's all it looks like.
Right. Except for the flatwing crickets, when they're doing that, it's not going to be trembling. They're just going to be raising them and lowering them.
All they're doing when they're trembling is they're opening and closing their wings really quickly.
Right, but there's ridges, and I assume that the ridges is what was causing...
But that doesn't affect how it appears, because that's a very, very fine scale.
Ah, so like a violin bow.
To your eye, they would look exactly the same.
I see.
I still wanted to see the difference between a silent versus audible stridulation move. The stridulation is the rubbing of the wings together. I imagined air guitar versus playing a guitar, miming a function versus doing a function. To me, though nuanced, these have inherently distinct physical and aesthetic qualities.
Is there any assumption of what's going to happen when the satellite behavior is no longer available in terms of the crickets evolving some sort of replacement to that call in a form of a dance?
So, never say never, but what I think could happen is that if the normal wings all disappear, and the populations are small, so that's possible, then I think the whole shebang's just going to go extinct, and the populations will stop existing.
Is there any indication that they are going to be more physical strategies because they are seemingly more locomotive and more agile?
I suppose it's possible they could end up increasing the likelihood that they're going to run into a female, sure. They're not going to suddenly, evolve another pair of legs or something.
Right.
There's limits to what's kind of possible.
Right. But it just seems like the satellite behavior is already a type of choreography that's kind of a sneaky one. I'm just curious whether or not the crickets are just going to step up and have some sort of performative act.
But see, they can't do that unless they have the structures and the organs that would allow them to. That's the thing.
Because physical movement...
And they don't. Like, there's only so many ways you can sense your environment.
Right. And so
you can smell it, you can see it, you can hear it. And they're crappy at seeing, and anyway, it's dark.
Yeah, the seeing portion is very
They can hear really, really well.
Here's the trap.
They're really good at hearing. They don't see very well, and it's dark.
I assume that they are very good night seers because they...
Nope.
Okay. Then that's a huge problem.
All of my alternative survival strategies were also shut down immediately. I thought maybe a cricket could discover that rubbing its wings against a blade of grass would create a new type of sound, or a frog's croak could stand in place of a chirp and become the bait for the satellite behavior, or there could be another genetic mutation that suddenly gave crickets excellent night vision.
How much longer do you think there's going to be the chirping crickets so that there's still satellite behavior?
I do not know. This is the thing that keeps me doing this project.
Yeah.
Is, like every time I go, I think, oh, well, are they still going to be there? This is why we do science. You just see what happens out there.
Yeah, no, you're just watching.
Where is it?
I'm like dying for a more specific like visual of exactly
Yeah,
how
and there
that
kind of isn't. We don't do videos much, so like I said, I mean, I'm taking data, but I don't do it with videos because I kind of know what it looks like, and I'm there, and I can just record, walk this far, or whatever it is I'm recording, but it's not in the form of a video.
What is the likelihood that I could capture anything if I was to go into the field or
In the field, almost nothing. In the lab, you could certainly do something.
Of course, yeah.
You couldn't film it in the field because they're under the grass.
They're under the well, yeah. No, I'm definitely at the edge of trying to figure out if there's a way to film it in the grass.
Yeah, well, not really, because again, dark, and B, you'd have to be super lucky because you'd have to catch
The satellite.
basically not really.
And that would be a whole other.
But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't bother doing it. There's no reason to do it in the field.
Okay. There's no reason to do it felt. Except for the natural landscape, it would be an infrared, so it'd be like a night, be something
Right,
like
but then it's just a patch of grass. It's the lawn. So
it's a lawn, yeah. It's a close-up of a lawn waiting for hours for crickets to show up.
At this point, I hung up, rented an infrared camera, and booked my flights to Kauai. I spent 5 nights by myself hunting for silent crickets and found katydids, cockroaches, beetles, wild boars, centipedes, cicadas, frogs, but no flatwings, obviously. It was very dark.
Okay.
It rained every 30 minutes. I couldn't see anything without looking through the actual
I don't think that's
viewfinder.
a cricket.
It's a catidid.
Not a cricket.
And was being taunted by the cacophony of every other species mating call, which I had completely forgotten about.
Oh no. I think I'm just gonna catch him in my hand.
What is that? Is that a cricket? Oh my god, it's so loud. Where did you go? Oh no. Come on, focus. Come on, big cricket.
This futile mission humorously aligned me and my stubbornness with these flatwings and their invisible mating dance. I also was expending tons of energy looking for something that I knew was essentially impossible to find, but which I also felt was necessary.
Not a cricket.
But this brings me back to the idea of excess movement, vestigial choreographies, autopilot behavior, the ways that we both individually and collectively go through the motions of an activity or day.
Oh my god, I just lost him again. Oh no, he's there.
What are the half-lives of our corporeal vocabularies and gestures, like the call me, or call me, or call me, or call me, or Siri, call me, or someone, that reference outmoded interface, technology, or architectures, and the influx of the new, and why do some persist and others dissolve?
Where?
Just recently, I came across a new study by researchers at St. Andrews that shows, contrary to expectation, the flatwings are still vigorously performing these futile movements with no sign of slowing, and are currently looking into whether or not there's any potential for this excess movement to acquire new meaning or function. As of now, it's unknown whether or not the entire cricket population will go extinct once the last chirping crickets die off and they lose their satellite strategy, which could happen at any moment. And the flatwings continue to perform this silent dance, increasing and decreasing their rhythms as the temperature rise and fall, just like the choreography I was in the process of developing that first led me to this study.